All right, so in 5.1 practice extension, we are looking at if numbers given or ordered pairs given or a table given or a graph given is or is not a function. Now, this is something we did not talk about in the lesson very much at all. So I just want to take a couple minutes to review how we know if something is or is not a function, because this will be very important later. So remember, a function is something like y equals 2x. And we have x values or inputs. And let's say, just for the sake of right now, our inputs are -1, 0, and +1. Those are our inputs. We also have y values, and these are our outputs. And we find what the output is by taking the inputs, taking the x values here, and putting each individual one in for x, and then that'll tell us what our output is. So -1, if we put that in for x, we have 2 times -1 would give us -2. If we put 0 in for x, 2 times 0 gives us 0, and 2 times 1 would give us 2 again. So as we can see, for this function, we have individual inputs, which are all different, and then our outputs are all different. So we can see that this is a function. If we were to put this on a graph, we would have -1, 2 would be here. Oops, -1, -2, my fault. -1, -2, 0, 0, and 1, 2. So we would have a line going just like this, and would represent that function. Now, a rule with our function. If we're looking at our table, we can have y values that repeat. We can. Now, in this case, they do not. But if we had a graph that maybe looked like a parabola, we would have, maybe at 1, we would have y values that would repeat, and that's okay. We still can have a function. But if we had a graph, let's say it looks something crazy like this, where x values repeat. Right here you could see a couple x values. This is -2. We have a couple x values that repeat. If we have a graph where x values repeat, then it is not a function. All right, so if we're looking up here at number 1, and this is the first problem on your 5.1 practice extension. If we look at number 1, again, we can have y values that repeat. So let's look at the y values. 3, 4, 6, and 8, they don't repeat, so no big deal. Our x values, 1, 2, 3, and 4, they do not repeat either. So none of the values repeat at all. So here we can say we have a function. Now, if we look at the second one, let's look at our x values. -4, 4, -2, so far we're good, and -4. Well, here we have a problem, because we have 2 x values that repeat. So this is not a function. If we had this on a graph, -4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 4, 2, negative 2, 2, and negative 4, we would have a problem because these 2 points are right on top of each other. We cannot have that. If we were somehow to connect all these points, if they did all connect, and say we just had this graph that looked kind of funky like this, then we would use what's called, maybe you guys have talked about it before, but we would use the pencil test. So you take your pencil and you move it across this graph, all the way across, and if there's any points where your pencil hits 2 points on the graph, like it would right here, then we can see and know that is not a function. All right, so in recap overall, and I know it's being repetitive, but I just want to make sure we all understand this. We can have repeating y values. So we can have repeating y values, or you could say a repeating range or a repeating output. We can have repeating outputs or y values, but we cannot have repeating x values. We cannot have repeating x values. We can't take the same input and put it into a function 2 times. We can only put it in once. If you're ever not sure, when you're going through this, if you're not sure, like for number 1, if you look at this and you're like, I don't know if this is a function or not, you can graph those points and then just use the pencil test like we talked about right here. Graph those points, run your pencil across. If your pencil ever hits 2 of those points at the same time, then it's not going to work. But if it doesn't, then we have a function. So hopefully that clears things up and helps as you go through this extension. If you're still a little bit fuzzy on the idea, then make sure you shoot me an email. We can set up a time for a Google Meet or